Ladies and gentlemen, this evening on The Unconventional, Pastor Bob Greaves is interviewing his special guest, Dr. John Shook. And there's nothing funny about that. It's just going to be completely awesome. So get ready for that in just a moment.
Well, good evening. My name is Bob Greaves, and they call me the Unconventional Pastor. And it's good to have you with us tonight. Sorry about some of the technical difficulties we were having that kept us from getting up right on time. However, even though you've had to wait, I think it'll be well worth it, because tonight I have with me a person whose clarity of thought and insight is something I truly admire greatly. And so I'd like to welcome Dr. Shook to my program. Dr. Shook, how are you doing this evening?
Hi, Bob. How are you? It's great to join you.
Awesome. Now, just to give some people a little bit of background on who you are you're professor of philosophy?
That's right.
And you teach, now I understand that although you live, say, in the Washington, D.C. area, you actually teach through online courses at Buffalo. And is there any other aspect of your teaching?
Sure, I can talk about where I teach nowadays, although I'm having technical difficulties hearing you. I hear about every other word. So maybe something could be worked on that, but I'll ramble for a minute. So I've been a professor of philosophy at Oklahoma State University and other places. In the last few years, I've been working with the Science and the Public Master's Program at the University of Buffalo. And this is a special degree leading to a Master's of Education. It has philosophy components, curriculum and syllabi components, philosophy of education, and a lot of information about communicating science to people who need to learn it. And frankly, we could all use more familiarity with science. The nice thing about this program is it is entirely online, so I could live anywhere, and I chose DC 3 years ago, which has been terrific, coming down and working with some secular think tanks, and also doing some part-time teaching at places like George Mason University in Northern Virginia.
Yeah, I have a brother-in-law, actually, who lives in the Fairfax area, and
I know.
Been down there to visit. Yeah. And nice place, a great place to visit, and what have you. Anyhow, also you've been involved with something called the Center for Inquiry. Could you tell us just a little bit about that as well?
Sure. The two main organizations I'm working with currently are the Center for Inquiry, which has its headquarters in both Buffalo and DC, and also the American Humanist Association. I work on educational programming for both organizations. The American Humanist Association is the oldest humanist organization in North America, going back to World War II days, and they're also based here in D.C.
Wow, yeah. Now, I'll tell you what, I've seen the Center for Inquiry also has a YouTube page that they can easily find. If you get to YouTube, just put in the Center for Inquiry. And I was impressed with just a tremendous amount of videos there for I went through a few of them myself, and there's an amazing education a person could get in a variety of discussions that people can have. How long has that YouTube page been up there, and how many videos do you have?
Well, actually, the founder and president of the Center for Inquiry for many years, until recently he retired and he's now passed away. His name is Paul Kurtz, and he was a professor of philosophy at the University of Buffalo all through the 70s and 80s into the 90s a bit. before he worked for the Center for Inquiry full time. And he had a cable access show back in the day, back in the 80s and all through the 90s. So we have vaults and libraries and shelves full of cassette tapes, VHS tapes, all sorts of recordings now of years and years and years. Also, we have videotaped lectures by visiting speakers, intellectual scholars, authors that have come through either our Buffalo headquarters or one of our other branch centers. So, as you say, we have an incredible library, some of which is now available on the web, and much of the rest, of course, we wish we had the time and resources to get it all converted to our digital world, but we'll get there. And it's quite a treasure trove.
Well, I'll tell you, I was impressed with what I saw and its usefulness to all sorts of people. By the way, Joey, I should mention to you that I've got voices over my shoulder telling me that they are unable to find the show actually on Ustream. And if we're recording it locally there, that they say it's not actually streaming. I don't know if that's what they're getting is just a blank picture saying coming up. And so you might want to look into that, Joe.
Hi, Bob. I just checked it myself.
But we're still recording, so even if this ends up on YouTube and not okay, there it is. It's
Bob. It's
starting to stream through.
Yeah, there's a bit of a delay, but it should play through.
Okay.
Yeah, just keep going. Thanks.
Okay, great. Good. Yeah, very good. And I'll tell you what, also, Dr. Shook, you are the author of a number of books. And to be honest with you, the only one I'm actually personally familiar with is the God Debates. And I was particularly impressed with this book because you actually wrote it as something that can be very useful to people on both sides of this debate in many, many ways. How did this book come about?
Well, it came about because I was working for the Center for Inquiry. I started back in 2006, and the academic employees of the Center for Inquiry have this little rite of passage we go through. It's called Debating William Lane Craig. And several of us had done it by 2007, 2008. I had my debate in 2007. And of course, he's just one of the most prominent theologians. There are many others in America. And it's quite a fun debate circuit. Some liken it to a circus. I take it a little more seriously than that. But there's plenty of debates going on all the time. And us on the atheist side help each other out, lend advice,
Sure.
Watch out for good arguments, what's working, what isn't. And so I was inducted into this little band of atheist brethren and some sisters as well. So it's a diverse bunch. So it's sort of an attempt in a book to relay what the current situation is like now at the end of the 20th century, start of the 21st century, arguing about God. And there's plenty to argue about, some new wrinkles and a lot of old arguments that can be argued better, I think, than frequently they are in theatrical style debates in front of audiences. So I wanted to get everybody up to speed. I wanted to get secular people up to speed if they're interested in what arguing over God's existence is like, what it's like to talk to religious people, the kinds of defenses of God that you're likely to hear from religious people. And I wrote it also for everybody to get a sense that these are very important philosophical conversations. It's one of the essential things. It's one of the springs, one of the engines of Western civilization. That's long conversation that we've had between philosophy, science, and religion. And to be a cultured person, I think it's important to have some familiarity with the God debates.
Sure. In fact, as you probably know even better than I do, how philosophy and religion have at times walked hand in hand, and they've at times gone in kind of isolated directions and come back together from time to time. But I was really impressed with the fact that in this book you were really trying to, raise the bar for both sides in this discussion so that we can have far better discussions on both sides of it, which to me I think is extremely commendable, because it shows to me that what you're really looking for is some good discussion, meaningful and relevant discussion, which I think it doesn't do us any good if we, for example, take somebody who might be particularly good at phrasing a term and have them debate with somebody who just doesn't seem to know how to, put their shirt on. And so it's great in that way. Also, I'd have to say that near the end of the book, something I wasn't expecting and I was delighted to see is you get into this theology, into the mist. Could you tell us a little bit about that?
Oh, well, a very important component to many kinds of theologies, not just Christian theology, but also Jewish and Islamic theology, the great Indian traditions, Hinduism, Buddhism. Around the world, you can find religious people that get very interested in profound religious experiences. Sometimes those religious experiences are very moving because of the compelling and very powerful emotions that can come over us when we participate in, let's say, a historical tradition or the rituals or the scriptures of that tradition. So that's one way to participate in myth. It's a little bit mysterious how this works on us. It can work on everybody. Secular people can get a thrill from reading Shakespeare or Charles Dickens, but it is an important component of what it means to be religious. It's a little bit of a mystery, our encounter with long traditions that go back to time immemorial, and you feel like you're participating in something far more profound and bigger than our little worldly troubles today. So that's one way to get sort of mystical. Another way is to encounter what you think is divine. If you're religiously inclined, you may think that you're having some sort of direct encounter with a spiritual realm or with God or a messenger of God or what have you. So that's an important component for understanding religion. Mystical experiences aren't supposed to make sense. If they made sense, they would be ordinary experiences of the natural world. They don't make sense. And nevertheless, the mind tries to grapple with them. And one thing that can happen when minds try to grapple with these profoundly disturbing or terrifying or just simply awesome experiences is to interpret them religiously. Another way is to try to grapple with just sort of that sense of the more. Scientific people can have these experiences. Ordinary people can encounter a sense of being confronted with something just tremendously vaster and bigger and more important than they are. Perhaps a walk out on a clear night under the starry skies can do it for some people. Scientists frequently speak of these profound experiences of being confronted with just the abyss of the immensity of the universe and how we're only peering into it just a little bit. And it can be a very humbling experience. For religious people, it's no difficulty at all to just say that these things are beyond reasoning, but you still have to deal with them in some way. And I think religion tries to deal with these sorts of experiences.
Even as Albert Einstein said, that, I want to know the mind of God. And of course, he didn't mean that in a personal God sort of way. But to him, there was a certain just profound awe in discovering the nature of reality, which is amazing. But to me in particular, I liked that chapter, Theology into the Mist, not just with a clever use of the word mist there, but that, in a sense, as you may know, that, I am a person who's theistic, but at the same time, I'm also very agnostic. And so in reading this, one of the things that I've always had to acknowledge myself is that there are certainly numerous ways other than perceiving the mystical experiences that I've had as being truly what it is they seemed to have been. And as a result, I recognize myself that I am robbed of anything compelling. And so I could relate to this. In fact, I only read through the chapter once, and I intend to read it through again because I think I can certainly get a lot more out of it. But I thought this was unusual. But again, I don't really travel in the debate circles as you may have, and the amount of research you had to do for this book. I was curious, are you familiar with other authors who've also dealt with this aspect of we find certain people who are believers in God, but have really kind of stepped back away from attempting to claim that they have knowledge or dogma or aspects that they can actually define. So, I mean, is there a lot of people talking about this particular thing? Because it was a delightful surprise for me to see it here in your book.
Well, I'm having some sound difficulties hearing you, Bob, but I think I got the gist of your question. There are many religious authors who can be very helpful trying to understand religious experience. Of course, I'm unable to read them terribly sympathetically. It's not a dimension of my experience, not being a religious person. But there is some good literature and there's some irresponsible literature. In the irresponsible literature, I would put a lot of the ordinary books that you might come across that are mainly only interested in assuring the reader that whatever denomination they're already in, they should only interpret their religious experiences in light of the dogmas of that particular denomination. If that's what you want, if that's what you're looking for, if you're just looking to confirm what you're told you're already supposed to believe, then I suppose that'll work for you. But you won't learn a whole lot, and I don't think you will learn very much about other religions. Some of the most important writings that escape this trap have been done. I'll just mention one major philosopher in particular who's been enormously influential in the 20th century. His name is John Hick, Hick. And John Hick has written many books. They're all easily accessible, and most of them are on sale in paperback now. You can get them. But he has advocated a much broader vision, a much more tolerant vision for trying to understand all the diverse kinds of religious experiences that people are capable of having. He's not interested in trying to pigeonhole people into one particular religion. He happens to be most familiar with Christianity, but he's also undergone studies of other religions, and he recognizes that different religions can have sometimes the same or similar religious experiences, and other times quite different experiences, and interpret them differently. And that might just have to be okay. So he's classified as a pluralist among theologians. And I think you and some of our readers would find him very interesting, regardless of whether or not you personally happen to be religious. But if you're going to understand differences between religions, I think you have to appreciate how much diversity there really is that gets lumped under a single heading, like mysticism.
Mm-hmm. Yes. I remember when I was in my 20s, I read a book. I think the title of it was Deeper Experience of Christians, or Deeper Experience of Famous Christians. And I remember at the time reading it that it just felt like going to a pep rally. And it just was filled with stories that basically tease the fantasy of the mind. But, then when you try to talk to other people about some of those aspects, it really just, you don't realize how much you're alienating people who tend to be a little bit more grounded. By the way, something I think that also, part of what I'm really hoping to do today is to actually have a lot of the people who might be my viewers consider a lot of the things that you're doing as something that could be extremely useful for them. When I went to one of your websites, I saw that you had a number of videos about John Dewey. They were awesome. I thought they were really good. And I thought that you Yeah, I'll tell you, we're both teachers, and so I really liked your style of in those videos. You really tried to present John Dewey, and you kind of stepped to the side and let John Dewey kind of be presented there. I thought that was very good, but also it was obvious to see that that's a topic that you just enjoy and are very passionate about. It was wonderful.
Thanks.
Yeah, and it made me wonder about a few things that you talked about, context and how we learn things based on the fact that we run into needs that we have that if we didn't have a need, we wouldn't we wouldn't be searching out certain kinds of knowledge, I suppose, or inquiry into things unless it's somehow in a practical way related to some problem we feel a need to solve. I was just curious, with that kind of a background, do you have a particular way that makes sense to you as why you think that people do have a need to turn to a religious explanation for experience?
Could you repeat that, Bob? I only caught about every other word again.
Okay.
I
Yeah,
wish
I was saying that,
the sound could be improved. I'm having difficulty.
Yeah, Joe, if you could send him a little bit more of my signal, sometimes it cuts out because it has a gate on it. That'd be great. Basically, my question was, in light of your pragmatism and your interest in John Dewey, I was wondering, in light of the things that he was saying about the context in which our inquiry begins, I was wondering if you have a personal theory of your own that makes sense to you about why it is people seem to have a need to explain their experience in religious terms.
Oh, well, I think religion is the sort of thing that has many, many components. Sometimes lumping something under one word creates an illusion that you found an essence to something when there really is no essence or core necessarily there. For example, obviously, religion has a great deal to do with reinforcing morality. And it may have developed in particular ways for humanity the way it did because it was able to be put into service for saying, hey, it's not just us, your fellow tribespeople, telling you how to behave. In some sense, you have obligations to something much bigger than any of us. To the world or to something that's bigger than the world. Once the idea of gods got invented, perhaps we owe obligations and duties to this God out of reverence and gratitude for having created us, perhaps, or whatever the story goes. And I think people do like some assurance that morality can be more than just what everybody happens to think at the time. There's a naturalistic way of understanding how morality is more than just what everybody thinks. But
Sure.
Religion got there first. And so religion has maintained this sort of claim to monopoly on being able to explain why we have these rules rather than those rules. And that can be very reassuring for people. Another job that religion can do is religion can be very comforting in times of tragedy and terror and provide some relief for our deepest fears. Well, this is very different from having to reinforce a morality. Instead, religion can be there for people to try to give them some assurance that there's something more that will take care of things, that something good ultimately may come of life when life goes badly, that we can have hope and optimism, perhaps if not in this life, perhaps in a next life. And I think hope of an afterlife has been something very powerful in the history of religions around the world. So that's another component, and people find it very, very, very satisfying, obviously.
Right.
Another thing that
Go ahead.
religion can do is, in some sense, religion can not only reassure people that there's definite answers about morality or definite answers about the afterlife, but I think sometime in the last 5,000 years ago, religion took on the additional task of trying to have some sort of ultimate explanation of everything, some way of stitching together all the loose ends about our biggest questions, about where the world came from, about why we see the world as it is around us. Why does it have these features rather than those features? Why are we here? It's not clear that very old religions had this function, but
Right.
when religions became sort of oral narratives repeated over and over again and then written down, it became very important for religions to have sort of the same story. So a religion preserves a tradition, a sort of origin myth about where the first gods came from, and then once there were gods, how the universe got created, and then once there's a universe, how life and human beings got created, and then right now you can get their story is pretty complicated. What have the gods been doing for humanity? What's humanity been doing about the gods, and so forth? So I think these
Yeah.
big three jobs that religion can do can appeal to any of us, especially if there's no other answer on the table. And for a very long time, religion had a monopoly on being able to supply um, very believable answers to these three biggest areas of questioning about life.
Yeah, and I that makes a lot of sense to me. It really does. And in fact, it to me, I also see something in it that I'm not, that I don't like in this sense. That I think that sometimes, or not sometimes, but more often than it should, that the concept of a hope after death uh, uh, leads us into some sort of a passive role in realizing that if we're going to make life better for human beings on planet Earth, now today is the day to do that. Rather than saying, okay, so we can just live in misery now, it'll be wonderful in the life to come. Sometimes I feel that hope, the way that a lot of religious traditions look to it, particularly even some of the eschatological views that we have, almost tell people, oh, this is the way the story's going to work out. It's going to be horrible and miserable. And it strikes me as causing them to kind of drag their butts with a heavy anchor across the progress of man in improving what we're doing. And so that part of religion, even though I am theistic, I find potentially disturbing. And the other thing is that I also get the impression that the attempt to use one's religion as a way of explaining things was really a form of jealousy. That when the Christian world started to find that the scientific world was becoming very powerful, very, very competent, very coherent, and had its own authority, it would strike me as being, something that the Christian world was jealous of the fact that the scientists are starting to get some real credibility. So they kind of thought, well, let's see if we can grab a piece of the action. Can you relate to that at all? Or?
Oh, sure. In many ways, I can agree that the concept of personal immortality for ordinary schmucks, and you and I would count as ordinary schmucks. This is actually a rather young concept as far as, if you look at
Right.
the many tens of thousands of years that certainly religions have been around. The idea that everybody or even most people get a good chance at a reasonable afterlife, that idea is actually less than about 4 or 5 thousand years old. And it
Correct.
arose in
Yeah.
civilizations where there was an awful lot of, frankly, politics going on. I think there's a deep
Yes.
connection between the politics of life on Earth and the politics of immorality. For example, let me explain what I mean. If you go back far enough in the literature of religions that has been preserved, ancient Babylonian stories, ancient Chinese mythology, ancient Egyptian mythology, ancient Hindu mythology, going back to the original writings, it was not the case that any of these major centers of religious thought held out hope that ordinary people would get any sort of afterlife. They didn't believe it.